I'm Kalina Lohman.
I'm Erica Trimble.
I'm Jocelyn Wood.
Okay, so we have some terms that we're going to define for you. Diversion rate is just the percentage of waste material that gets diverted from landfills, and it goes to recycling, composting, or reusing.
Municipal solid waste is a lot of everyday products that we use, like packaging products, glass, bottles, furniture, clothing, grass clippings, and food scraps that get thrown away. Life cycle cost is a type of analysis to determine the cost of ownership of a fixed asset over its entire economic life. And that takes into account the cost of purchasing, installation, maintenance, operation, upgrading, disposal, and other costs. Metrics is basically a set of numbers and ways of evaluating a process to determine if it's effective and to use as a baseline for suggesting improvements. LEED NC stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design New Construction. And LEED EBOM stands for, again, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, Existing Buildings, Operations and Maintenance.
Construction and demolition waste, also kind of abbreviated to C&D, is the waste mostly in demolition, all of it. You mentioned construction waste is the stuff that's left over after the building.
Okay, and waste to energy plants are factories where you send your waste instead of to a landfill in order to be incinerated so that that energy can be turned into electricity and things like that can be used to reduce the amount of waste and increase the diversion rate. And RFID chips are radio frequency identification chips that have recently been used to monitor recycling habits. Okay, so we're first going to go over kind of the benefits of recycling. There are a lot of different types of recycling, but the two most prominent are paper and plastic. And one of the pros is that less waste is taken to landfills, which increases the diversion rate, and for businesses and organizations that decreases the cost of trash pickup, because the less waste you have, the trash needs to get picked up and less it costs. There are also garbage container recycling grants that are provided by CalRecycle, which is the Department of Recycling Resources and Recovery. These grants, the beverage container recycling grant specifically provides funds for establishing recycling programs and also expanding on them. Recycling programs in terms for cities are also less costly to operate than programs for landfills and waste collection. Recycling is $50 to $150 per ton, and a waste disposal program is about $70 to $200 per ton, so it is a little less, and in the end it can really add up. One of the not as prominent recyclings, but really important for food service, is the used oil recycling. So used oil, cooking oil for food service, can be converted into biofuel, and a lot of companies that recycle it will go to a food service or organization and pick it up for you, and they might even pay you for it. There are grants available for this as well. They provide funding for your programs, and then also some provide funding if you're doing exploratory programs or transferring programs to other communities to try and promote the use of recycling. And some more general benefits, it's just gives you a positive reputation on your organization or community that you're trying to be green. Recycling is just good for the economy. It can really stimulate businesses and create jobs, and then there's just a laundry list of environmental benefits, such as it saves energy, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and it's just good for the environment.
So while there are clearly a lot of pros to recycling, there are some cons and they're not frequently discussed, so we're going to go over them today. Glass and paper transportation and sorting is expensive and can actually offset the savings of using recycled products rather than raw materials. Also, the transportation of these items for recycling consumes fuel and so therefore produces air pollution, which can counterbalance the energy and pollution savings of actually recycling. So there's a group called the Waste Reduction and Recycling Working Group that works with the UC system at their medical centers, and it's been focusing on the challenges of reducing municipal solid waste, as I discussed in the previous slide, in the university's medical centers. They have created an online reporting tool to monitor this. So here are some of the findings. The training of staff has been really difficult, mostly because budget cuts have reduced a lot of their abilities to train with the appropriate methods. And of course, employee cooperation can be a challenge. Developing sustainable financial structures for waste reduction and recycling programs has also come up as a big challenge. Another challenge is that they need to include the cost of waste disposal and recycling into procurement life cycle cost analysis. So clearly that's going to be a very time-consuming process, as it involves quite a few calculations and awarenesses that you need to have in order to provide accuracy, and accuracy in itself is going to be difficult to attain with such a wide-reaching program, especially in a place like the medical center where they're running tons of different programs and seeing lots of different clients and working with different materials. And also defining appropriate metrics for reuse, as well as developing zero waste best practices for LEED NC, once again leadership in energy and environmental design for new construction and also for existing buildings.
Okay, so now let's move on to the entire UC system. As most of you know, the UC system has a policy of zero waste by 2020, meaning that we want all waste diverted from landfills into some other sort of program. As Jocelyn brought up just before, this is a graph of all of the UCs and their medical centers, and as you can see, the Davis Health Systems, UCLA Medical Center, and the UCSD medical centers are having a very hard time dealing with this waste diversion. As we can also see, the reason we brought up the C&D, the construction and demolition, is UC Berkeley dropped significantly in the past year. If you didn't know, they redid their entire stadium, and as we can see from the example of Brent Hall, demolition material can be recycled 100% and 92% of construction material can be recycled, so that really boosts UC Berkeley in the past. The UC system is kind of moving away from recycling. They're still doing it, but they don't feel like they need to emphasize it as much anymore, and as they said, the next step is composting, and that's the new thing they need to really emphasize. And not only do the UCs and their medical centers focus on recycling, but also other UC programs such as the UC Press, which publishes books for the UC system, and they use recycled paper in many of their books. So let's move on to some of the individual UCs. First, the Northern California UCs. As stated before, UC Berkeley kind of dropped for a bit, and UC Berkeley, I kind of say, it's small space, big problems. They're located in the middle of a city, so it's very hard for them to do a lot of recycling programs as compared to, say, UC Davis, where we have such a large campus, we have our own landfill, and we're able to do a lot of programs because we have the space and the materials to do that. UCSF also has some similar problems to Berkeley, but they've also kind of taken on some other steps of recycling the miscellaneous. They recycle keys, eyeglasses, along with a lot of other stuff, which is very interesting. UC Merced, being brand new, kind of took a step up with recycling and doesn't just do the basics of the plastic bottles, aluminum cans and stuff, and they also do plastic bags, bubble wrap, and pallet wrap. This is pretty important for food service. And UC Santa Cruz is really rapidly improving their recycling programs in the past few years. It wasn't until last year they actually got recycling bins inside their libraries.
Okay, and now for the Southern California UCs. So UCLA has this unique sort of process for the UCs where it utilizes a waste-to-energy plant. So that will actually increase its diversion rate by 32%. So it'll send a lot of its waste material to this plant in order to be, to be be incinerated in the plant in the bottom right corner, and it'll generate electricity rather than sending all of that to a landfill. It still has some amount of waste, but it's greatly reduced in comparison to the original amount. UC San Diego has a program called ChemCycle, where they'll actually take unused chemicals and donate it to researchers for free. So rather than sending that down into the sewage or into other chemical waste facilities, they'll try and utilize as much as they can in order to get as much benefit for their researchers as they can. UC San Diego and UC Riverside also both participate in this nationwide Recycle Mania program that will once a year for a few weeks increase the entire campus's awareness of recycling processes and things like that. UC Riverside in general, however, does not have a very strong recycle program on campus. As a UC, it does emphasize the importance of recycling and being green, but it focuses more on its online resources that shows people how to recycle, what they can do to help the environment, rather than implementing programs on campus. And UC Irvine is actually, it's got a lot of various programs that are trying to increase interest among students so that recycling doesn't fall by the wayside as composting takes the front stage. And so they have programs where you can decorate the recycling bins so that it raises awareness that those bins are around on campus. They have e-waste bins put out in classrooms every day, not just a few times a year, so that if you ever have batteries or electronics that need to be tossed, you don't have to wait until a certain pickup day, like you do at many campuses. And then, oh yeah, okay, so when students move out of the dorms at the end of the year, a lot of times they just trash a lot of their clothes, school materials, maybe some small furniture things that they buy at IKEA or Target. What San Diego does is they actually collect a lot of that waste and they can donate it. They have people who come and pick it up for use. So maybe if you wanted to furnish your apartment but didn't want to use your stuff, you could grab someone else's. So that program in and of itself does a lot to just recycle old materials rather than see all of that go to a landfill when it's still perfectly usable. Okay, so one thing that we also have to pay careful attention to is increasing the public participation in recycling programs, not just in UCs, but in towns and cities and things like that. So one thing that Cleveland, Ohio is sort of trying out and making more widespread in use is RFID chips. So again, that's radio frequency identification chips, and those are put into the recycling bins, and it monitors how often those bins are brought out to the street. If it is noticed that bins haven't been brought out in a few weeks, they'll actually send a person in to go and look at that individual's trash bin. And if it's composed of more than 10% recyclables, people actually get fined $100. So that's a way. A lot of people have criticized it for being too harsh in terms of punishing people rather than rewarding them for recycling. However, it has been very effective. It's not that difficult to recycle, and they've tried to implement it 25,000 homes at a time. The entire population of Cleveland is around 150,000 people, and so at a rate of 25,000 a year. At this point, I think they're about halfway to their goal, because it's been going on for a few years. But it is a controversial sort of program that other cities are a little hesitant to put into practice just because of the whole punishment rather than reward aspect. On the other hand, there's Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is significantly smaller. However, they do have a rewards program that's been much better accepted in the town. It's called Recycle Bank, and it allows residents to track the amount of recyclables they have, and they successfully recycle every week, and it will actually reward them with points that can be used towards popular companies and restaurants such as Whole Foods, Yoplait, Kashi Foods. McDonald's is actually in there, which I personally thought was odd, but good for them. And Home Depot as well. And so that's a program that is in contrast to Cleveland's, but also very effective just because it allows people to buy other things with that capital money. So there was a Stanford business study that was looking to see which strategy would, best be utilizing people's recycling habits, and it found that if you present recycling facts in a negative, sort of urgent manner, it's actually much more effective to get people to start recycling now, rather than showing them the benefits of recycling. While looking at the benefits of recycling is generally helpful, it's not nearly as effective as, I suppose, scaring people into thinking that recycling is an urgent need. However, by sending out the benefits of recycling, people are more likely to put in place future programs and start planning on recycling more in the upcoming years. So that's something to think about in terms of maybe Cleveland or Cherry Hill's programs. And questions at the end of this?
But we do have like discussion questions.
We do have discussion lessons.
So, I mean, if anybody wants to start off discussion, you're welcome to, but we also have questions that we can start it off with. Okay, so one question we brought up is, do you think the UC medical systems should be included in the zero waste program? As we said, you can't recycle hazardous medical materials, so should they be included in that? Should they have the same goals as the rest of the UCs?
I think so, because it would make them more aware of how much waste they are actually producing, and maybe help people want to make more programs of getting rid of that kind of waste more effectively, or think of more innovative ways to get rid of stuff like that.
With medical centers, since there's a push to get everything all charts, everything electronic by 2014, that's probably going to be a huge amount of waste, all the paper they're going to have to get rid of, at hospitals, years and years and years of medical records. I'm sure people are probably thinking about how they can get recycling programs going for that, but that's something that's different than a school.
I think it would be important for them to just slowly transition into a more recyclable society in a sense, but yeah, going along with, because people are transferring to electronics, I think it would be important to actually just have them start thinking about them, have them start moving forward with it, and then eventually, hopefully, we would be able to.
And because of the environmental, hazardous waste, I don't know that you could necessarily say that they could go zero waste, but I think they could be held accountable to all other aspects of the zero waste plan. Leaving that aspect aside until maybe it could eventually be incorporated, but at least they could be held accountable for all other aspects.
And also, going off of what she said, so I think the zero waste percentage should be adjusted for the medical centers, just so it's you don't account for hazardous waste that you can't recycle as part of the entire percentage. So then that way you can see a more reflective outcome.
Another thing we had is, so as we saw, the UC systems kind of said, we kind of know about recycling, we're moving on to composting. Do you think we need to just completely stop recycling education? I mean, as we saw in Cleveland and stuff, people still do throw away recyclables in the trash. Should we just stop? I mean, a lot of us think, oh, I know it's recyclable, but do we really do?
I don't think so, because I know we will be talking about composting, but there's a lot of types of material that can't be composted, so we would rely on recycling. So I think it's important to have awareness for both to decrease waste altogether.
And then also DCs are a place where at least I learned a lot about recycling, so I think incoming freshmen need that basic understanding of what you can recycle and what you can't. The UC system isn't the perfect place to get that education.
I agree. I think that we need to educate them, because I think a lot of people still don't know which plastics are recyclable and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of confusion.
I think they should definitely keep educating, and I think it's really helpful that they put like pictures of like what can and can't be recycled, because it's hard just like with the numbers and stuff on bottles. So they can see that.
One thing I've found difficult about recycling is that rules change depending on where you are. So I think that they need to make by the area that you're in the like rules of recycling clearer, because I know like in my hometown I can recycle different things than I can here. So definitely make that more like aware, people more aware of what specifically in this area, or make it more universal what can be recycled.
I think educational wise it is very important, but also like environmental wise, if we do stop recycling, we're gonna go back to our old habits and seem like no one's gonna recycle anymore. It's just gonna go through this whole circle where we're gonna teach about recycling, forget about it, teach about it again, and forget about it. So it's something that should always be there.
Yeah, and I think
A
also,
few more comments, then we have to.
I think also like the depth of the education needs to be pushed a little bit, because like this week I actually like found out that like Davis only takes 1 and 2 for like the plastic that's recycled, and like I had no clue, but like no one looks at that little number, and so yeah, I think like just the depth of education needs to also be increased.
Going off of that, it's a funny note is like sometimes the lid and the can are different, or the container. But I think it's important to maintain the education, but it's also on companies, a lot of them are trying to go to compostable containers. So that's also an interesting thing to add in there, because I think the lids on Starbucks aren't recyclable, but the cup is. It's not, or like there's something weird about it. But then another company is doing completely compostable cups or recyclable cups. Interesting.
We could probably talk for an hour on this subject.
We need to move forward.
Great, thank you.